Hello, I'm Rachel Barr, curator for the National Quilt Museum, and we're delighted to present this artist talk by collection artist MJ Kinman. MJ is a Kentucky quilter whose inspiration is a girl's best friend. There are many facets to her quilting journey, and we'll learn her secret to making fabric sparkle.
I make quilts that look like faceted diamonds and colored gemstones. I started doing this back in, I think I started it about 1996. In 1991, an image of a gemstone showed up in my mailbox. It was a 12-faceted, brilliant cut, and I had just started to quilt, right? I knew this much about quilting and this much about gemstones. And so, but I was looking at it and I thought, inside of that circle, it's all just straight lines, right? It's all just straight lines, so there's gotta be a way to make a quilt out of it. One of the things that I found was Cynthia England's picture piecing technique, that beautiful quilt that won her all sorts of accolades in the 80s. It was called Peace and Quiet, P-I-E-C-E and Quiet. And the little blurb in the book that I read about it, it just blew my mind. It said, this is how I'm gonna do it. It's just like the light bulb went off. And so it's not foundation paper piecing, it's freezer paper piecing. I call it traditional piecing using freezer paper as your template. Because sometimes when people hear, especially when I'm vending at a show, people say, oh, is this foundation paper piecing? Or they will tell me, oh, that's foundation paper piecing. I'm like, no, it's not. And they'll literally run away from my booth. I'm like, come back, I don't do paper piecing either. This is not it. Basically, if you can put two pieces of fabric right sides together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you can do this technique. You can make my quilts, my patterns, basically. It's really quilt by number, isn't it? Quilt, like paint by numbers, it's piece by numbers, right? And I always put a piece plan in those larger ones. So basically it's, so this unit to this unit, so this unit to this unit, put those two units together, and then I just do that for all of the pieces in the pattern. Chart number 4 gets its title from a part of the process when they're making bourbon. They literally shoot fire into those bourbon barrels. I thought, very fun. This is what I want to do. I found a gemstone that was this little round, brilliant cut solitaire. Actually, it was an oval. It was an oval cut solitaire. And it was a zoisite. It was a little peach and gray zoisite. So I put it in my image editing app and I zorched it up. I basically increased the saturation level so it got very bright and fiery. And then I just played around with the design. Literally, I always, most of my quilts are inspired by actual gemstones, and then I'll always do a mock-up before I start putting fabric together. And so I did a little mock-up, and I was tilting the gem, and I thought, oh, this is a great design that I wanted to put in it, because really what I loved about that little gem was this kind of river of light that went through it. Okay, I always look for gemstones that have just a wonderful play of light or color, something very intriguing. And so I wanted to preserve that, so I kept this little river of light in there. And what I had done was cut out a piece of paper, with a blue marker, a little window, and that's how I was playing with the gemstone. But you know what? I really loved that little blue along with the orange and red, and so I put this little flame of fire around it, just as a little bit of a visual detail. I'll tell you a little bit about how I code for color. As I mentioned, I'm always looking at an actual gemstone, so I get my cues from its play of light and color. But the way I code things, because every single piece has 2 codes on it. It has a color code, and then it has a unique identifier. The unique identifier basically is its address, where it lives in the quilt, because no two pieces should have the same unique identifier. Because once you cut up all these little wonky bits, it only goes together one way, right? It only goes together one way. And so what that means is if you lose a piece, you're kind of stuck. So when I go to code, I always code for the lightest lights first. I always put my fabric in an array of value progression, from the lightest to the darkest, because value is what's going to do the work for you, okay? Your fabric, you want to know what work each of your fabrics are going to do. And the way you get brilliance is you put the lightest lights and the darkest darks together. That's the first rule of color interaction that M.E. Chevreul, a little French chemist, developed way back when. So I'll always code for the whites first, And then I will go in and I'll go to the opposite end of the value progression, and I'll tuck the blacks in around the whites. So I have that black and white juxtaposition, right? And then I'll go to the next lightest light, and then the next darkest dark, until I get to the very middle, where literally I'm making value judgments, right, about what I'm going to put. So that's how I code for color. My fabric that I used in this one, basically I paint my fabric. When I first started making these gemstones, I was using solid fabrics because to me it conveyed clarity. It was just sort of a flawless kind of a look. And then I got a little bored with that. I'm going to have to learn how to paint my fabric. I was not excited about it because, you know, who needs another learning curve, right? So I started experimenting, and now it's one of my favorite things I love to do. So you can see, for example, right here, do you see how this goes from kind of a dark to more of from a high saturated color to a low saturated color? It's very subtle, but that's what I want. So again, a little bit higher saturation, a little bit lower saturation, meaning there's a little bit more gray in it. Because one of the other rules that Emmy Chevrolet talked about is about saturation. Do you know how to make your quilts glow? You make your quilts glow, you take a high saturated color, meaning a bright color, a color that has no gray in it, and then you surround it with fabrics that have a lot of gray in them. Because the grayed fabrics are going to make the high saturated color brighter, and the high saturated colors are going to make the dull colors look a little bit more dull. So it looks like there's going to be a light, like it's lit from within. I do quilt all my quilts. I do this weird little flame or vine-like pattern because it's random, it's non-directional, it's non-representational, because what I want my quilting to do is disappear. I really want it to disappear. My quilts, I think, need a long sight line, so when people walk in a room, they're like, oh, look, that's a gem over there. And then they get closer and they're like, oh, that's a quilt, actually. I do have a website. It's my name, mjkinman.com. I sell my patterns. I have patterns for confident beginners, I call. I have a birthstone series. I have some, I call them my Diamond Divas. They're the larger ones that you can make. And I sell the fabric to go with those as well.
Thank you to our supporters of the National Quilt Museum. We rely on the generosity of our donors to help fund programs and to provide operational support for the museum. Because of you, we can have engaging artist talks and provide exceptional educational programming, and of course, caring for the most exceptional quilt collection made by today's quilters. Please visit us online at quiltmuseum.org to keep up with our exhibitions and all the activities. And we will look forward to seeing you here soon at the National Quilt Museum.